last night, what a game. I feel like the Portland Trailblazers are going to look back on it and say, you know what, we could have made it a series if we had been able to win Game 2 in Oracle Arena. They were up 17 at one point, up 15 at the half, and in the third quarter, the Warriors went vintage 73-win Warriors. I was thinking about this as I watched the game take place. The Warriors are more fun to watch without Kevin Durant. I think they're a better team without Kevin Durant. I think they're more talented with Kevin Durant. I was trying to think about how to explain this. But the ball runs through Steph Curry's hands when Kevin Durant isn't on the court and shows us that I think Steph Curry is one of the greatest basketball players to ever step foot on the court. Now, I know it's a little bit controversial to say that about Steph because he isn't the athlete that a lot of the greatest NBA players have been. But his ability to handle the ball almost like it's a yo-yo, to move in concert with Draymond Green and with Klay Thompson is unparalleled. And if you go back and watch sort of the mid-fast break plays as Steph is coming up the court, his ability to find Klay Thompson and his ability to get the ball to Draymond, as you saw in that final sequence when they did the pick and roll and Draymond got a layup when the Warriors were up 1. Kevin Durant is primarily an ISO player. He finds a mismatch, he gets the ball, gets to his spots on the court, and makes his shots. Steph really doesn't have spots on the court where he can make shots from because he can shoot from anywhere. And he can also pass the ball at any point. He plays a frenetic, exhilarating brand of basketball, which I don't believe anybody else in the current NBA or the history of the NBA has ever played at the same level that he does. And the way that I was thinking about it was, you would listen to this radio show, okay? I'm pretty good. Up next after me is Dan Patrick. He's pretty good. And up next after that is Colin Cowherd, and he's pretty good. That's 9 hours straight of radio on Fox Sports Radio. But if you put all three of us on a show together as a three-man show, I don't think that we would be as good as we all three are on an individual basis on our shows. And I think the reason is because all three of us would be so good that at times we would just kick back and take it easy and not really work that hard. So the sum of our parts would be less than the individual talent that we display, whether you like us or not, on a day-to-day basis. And you could toss in Gottlieb too and be like, hey, Fox Sports Radio from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is better than any sports radio has ever been on a national basis. And by the way, you could probably expand it and add Broussard to that equation as well, and Rob Parker. But let's say you had all four of us who are solo hosts, put all four of us in the same show. You would think to yourself, man, there's a lot of talent, whether you love or hate the four of us, in one sports talk radio show. But the result would be none of us would be as good as we are individually. And it would be because we don't have the space to excel. And also because if you have that large amount of talent, you don't need to work as hard. When there are multiple people talking on a show, and I've done three-man shows, I've done two-man shows, they're a lot easier, but you aren't as engaged because you're not responsible for everything. You aren't the pilot who's flying the plane. When he has Kevin Durant, I think Steph has a lot easier season because he can defer. He doesn't have to take control of every game. I think one reason why Steph is able to play like he is right now and has been able to turn it on the last 3 games is because he has a ton of energy because Kevin Durant has been there during the regular season and through the beginning of the playoffs. He hasn't had to worry about carrying this Warriors team like he did when they were 73-9. It's a crazy stat from you. Steph now has 171 points in 176 minutes since Kevin Durant got injured. He's averaging 45.5 points per 48 minutes without Kevin Durant. He is playing lights-out basketball on a level that we haven't seen since Kevin Durant got to the Warriors. Now, doesn't mean that the Warriors have a better chance of winning championships without Kevin Durant, because I think by the time you get to the playoffs, when you put all that talent and bring it all to bear in a 7-game series, it's virtually impossible to beat the Warriors, because even if Steph is off, even if Klay Thompson is off, it's unlikely Durant is also going to have an off game. So they can rely on all that talent once they get to the postseason. But in terms of sheer enjoyment, it might sound wild, but the Warriors are more fun to watch without Kevin Durant. Again, doesn't mean that I think they will be able to still continue the dynasty on the same level if Kevin Durant leaves, because the bench is not very deep. Shaun Livingston's getting older. As good of a play as Andre Iguodala made late against Damian Lillard, everything is changing in terms of his age. He's 35 now. So the Warriors haven't been able to find, I don't think, a young fourth option who can be a significant impact player for them going forward. But, man, it is incredibly fun to watch them down the stretch and see the plays that they make. I believe we have the audio. If you went to bed early and you didn't listen, here is what it sounded like with the Warriors up 3. Damian Lillard has the ball. He's rising up to attempt a 3. He's defended by Andre Iguodala, and this is what the audio sounded like from the Warriors radio network.
Lillard with the dribble, comes hard left side, tries to hold off Iguodala, stripped and stolen. Andre stolen. He stole it. Steph Curry throws it up at the horn. It doesn't matter. The game's over. Andre Iguodala, with the best hands in the business, has given the Warriors game 2. Final score 114 to 111.
That is the reaction. Now, I believe we also have Damian Lillard. I thought it was a great defensive play. Can't call a foul there. Andre Iguodala with a clear strip of the ball. Phenomenal defensive play to win the game for the Warriors. Lillard said after the game there was contact. I believe we have that. Let me hear that audio if we can.
So I was just trying to get space to get a 3 up. I know it's a tough position for the referees to be in to make a call at that point in the game. But, I tried to get a little bit of space the first time. He grabbed my arm. And, I lost the ball a little bit. I regained it, and I was going to shoot it again. And he got his hand on the ball. For me, as the offensive player, I felt like it was contact. There was a lot of contact, but obviously the ref is not going to decide the game or jump in at that point. So they good defensive play.
So that's a Lillard. Now, those are the reactions to the final play. This is a phenomenal series. I'm disappointed a little bit that the Trailblazers didn't win this game, because I think the drama surrounding Steph and Seth Curry is pretty fantastic. I think watching his parents, particularly if you are a parent, watch this game and also be interviewed. Del Curry was interviewed during the game. I thought that was pretty fantastic, and this has been a great storyline. But I think, again, the Trailblazers will look back on this. I told you I think they win Game 3. Then I think the Warriors come back and win Game 4 and close this out in Game 5 at Oracle pretty quickly now that they are up 2-0. I don't think that the Warriors will get the sweep, because I think the Trailblazers will come back in Game 3 and play better. We talked about the play at the end of the game, but, man, C.J. McCollum was really bad down the stretch. He got a lot of good looks. I think he finished 0 for his last 5. Any one of which of those baskets could have substantially swung the outcome of this game. I know he got them to this place by the way that he played in Game 7, but he had a lot of really good looks in the fourth quarter, and he wasn't able to deliver. Now, I said I enjoy watching the Warriors play even more than when they have Kevin Durant, but I also think it might be important at some point during this playoff run for the Warriors to get back Kevin Durant, but they have now announced that Kevin Durant is out for Game 3 and 4. I think it's fair to say that he's probably not going to play in this series at all unless it were to go 6 or 7 games. Steve Kerr talked about that after the game, an update on Kevin Durant's status.
He continues to progress, and he has made progress, but it's a little more serious than we thought at the very beginning, and so we'll see where it all goes.
So Durant out now, probably for the whole series, definitely for Game 3 and 4. Seems unlikely if the Warriors come back home up 3-1 that they would really bother bringing him out for Game 5. If this series were tied up at 2-2 and Kevin Durant could get better, maybe. I think what the Warriors are thinking is, let's get this done. Let's win in 4 or 5 games. Then we got some time, hopefully, before the NBA Finals start. I don't think the NBA Finals, I believe, has a set start date, and I don't think they begin until maybe the Thursday or Friday after Memorial Day. So there's a lot of time potentially that could be in the Warriors' favor, because they could win if they were able to go into Portland and win Game 3 on Saturday. They'd be up 3-0 and they could close this series out on Monday, I believe, if they got the sweep. I don't think they will. I think they'll close it out on Wednesday. But then they would have another full week after that if they could get this thing done in Game 4 or 5 to kick their feet up, sit back, and wait for the official start of the NBA Finals, because that start date is already set in stone. And then obviously the Warriors would hope that tonight's game between the Raptors and the Bucks, Game 2, and I think the Bucks get it 1, and I think the Bucks shoot a lot better than they did in Game 1, better than the 11 for 44. I think if you look at the way that potential series is going as well, that we're headed towards a Warriors-Bucks finals. And if we get that, man, I don't feel that good necessarily about whether the Warriors could get it done against the Bucks without Kevin Durant at all. This story that we're about to discuss is fascinating to me on so many different levels. We had, I think, Michael Avenatti on about 6 weeks ago, maybe it was 2 months ago, something like that, to discuss this Nike paying players story, which so many in the media seem like they want to bury. And I don't know if it's a case of the fact that it's Michael Avenatti who is bringing the story, and so it's like, hey, we're not going to pay attention to this story because of who's involved. But I find this story amazing because it is so incredibly detailed. And let's bring in Michael Avenatti now. And for people who don't know, Michael, thanks for coming on with us early this Friday morning. You uncovered a massive pay fraud scale story going on with Nike, and the fact that they've been paying players in high school and in college for years, fraudulently writing off those bills. They've been paying some of the top players across the college basketball landscape now and in the past. And it's like people are just ignoring it, both the players and their families. What's the latest you can share with us? And again, thanks for hopping on.
Well, happy to be on, and thanks for having me, Clay. The latest is that finally, at least a couple of these colleges have launched investigations into these payments. Those colleges are Oregon, University of Oregon, and UNLV, and I plan on meeting with investigators from both of those colleges within the next 7 to 10 days to provide information to them relating to these payments. You know, Clay, I don't traffic in nonsense. This isn't fabricated. You've seen the documents. The documents are clear as day relating to these payments, wire transfers, bank statements, text messages, emails. There's no question that this went on, and there's no question that it's far beyond a few players. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of players at colleges around the country. Now, I think you and I have talked about this before. I believe that there's nothing wrong with players being paid. In fact, I think these players are taken advantage by the colleges, but they should be paid by the colleges in an organized way. We can't have a system where you have a multi-billion-dollar corporation, Nike, paying players, bribing players and their families, putting them at risk for criminal charges, all in the interest of corporate profits to control the process. And that's basically what you have. You have Nike out there throwing money around, determining what colleges succeed in basketball and which don't. And that's not right.
And it's amazing because Adidas got crushed for this, right? And many Adidas schools got crushed for this, and Nike totally skated. And I still keep coming back to this. Why do you think Nike has skated on what they're doing? I was just texting with somebody who covers this story, and he was saying, there's no question that Nike was much worse than Adidas, yet Adidas is the company that got caught by the government, and it's like Nike's considered to be this angel company. Why has Nike been the favored, sort of company in this story, and why have most people ignored the fact that Nike's been doing what Adidas did, except much worse?
Well, I think that's the million or multi-million-dollar question is who does Nike know, and how are they able to get away with this? And why are people turning a blind eye to it? And we're going to continue to, speak truth to power and uncover evidence and documents and present that information, put it out there. And at the end of the day, we're going to get to the bottom of this and figure out exactly what has happened here. Because you're right, Adidas did get crushed. And what Adidas did is nothing, pales in comparison to the outright fraud and illegal acts of bribery, et cetera, by Nike, for the better part of a decade. I mean, what's shocking to me is, even in light of these documents coming to light and this information coming to light, that's unquestionable, these executives at Nike are still working there in their current positions. They haven't been suspended. They haven't been put on administrative leave pending an investigation. Nothing. They're continuing to do what they've always done, which is illegally bribe players.
Do you think people are ignoring this story because you're involved?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think it is an easy out for people to say that, and a lot of people have opinions about me on the political side and otherwise. I'm facing my own personal challenges right now, which I'm confident that we're going to be able to overcome. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at my track record over the last 20 years, Clay, I don't traffic in nonsense. I don't fabricate things. If I say something, it shakes out. I bring receipts, as they say, and I brought receipts in this case.
So in this case, and I want to go back, like, you were charged with a crime because Nike saw what you were trying to do. And for people out there who are paying attention to this story or haven't been paying attention to this story, effectively what happened is you were able to uncover a payment plan from Nike for top high school players and their families that went on a long time in the past. You went to Nike and said, hey, look at all this evidence I have of fraudulent behavior on behalf of your company and employees. You need to have an internal investigation. I want to do it. And they charged you with extorting them. And the government not only came out on the side of Nike despite this evidence, they came out against you. What happened there? Because we talked about this a little bit last time. You maintain your innocence in this case, and I think the documents, regardless of who is putting them forward, and I've looked at them, Yahoo Sports has written about it, I think they speak for themselves, and I'm still kind of stunned about the way this entire process went down as it pertains to Nike and the pay-for-play situation.
Well, I'm incredibly stunned about how this went down, and I'm looking forward to trying this case and the verdict in this case, because I am highly confident I am not going to be convicted of extorting Nike, and the allegation is absolutely absurd. I never attempted to extort Nike. In fact, I represented a client, an AAU basketball coach, who came to me with this information and had his own claims against Nike, because when he decided he wasn't going to go along with this scheme any longer, they decided to terminate his contract. And so when I went to Nike, it was in the realm of trying to settle a case on behalf of a client who was insisting that not only he be compensated for the damage they did to him, but that they also clean this very ugly scheme up. He was insistent upon that. So, what I engaged in was not extortion. And if it is extortion, you're going to have to arrest almost every attorney in America that engages in hard negotiation tactics. Now, maybe a lot of your listeners think that'd be a good start. I don't know, but
they might like to see me investigated and arrested too, just for the sports opinions I have.
Well, exactly. I mean, this was not extortion. It's absolutely absurd. And meanwhile, the rampant illegal conduct of Nike has continued unabated.
So for people out there who are just hearing about this for the first time, I know we've talked about the Adidas case on this show because I find it to be an intriguing example of what kind of goes on in the seedy underbelly of college athletics. And I'm with you in the context of I really don't care whether players are getting paid. I think they deserve compensation. I'm a capitalist. I want as much money to be made for people with talent as possible. But when you look at what Nike was doing, give me a kind of a quick synopsis of what this process was and why it was fraudulent.
Nike would have colleges sign contracts with Nike for Nike to provide apparel and to pay colleges basically sponsorship dollars in order to promote Nike's products, sneakers, hats, shirts, and the like. Nike would then go out and recruit high school players and their families and pay them money through usually third parties, AAU basketball coaches, handlers, sometimes direct. Sometimes the money would be paid in cash. Sometimes it would be paid by wire transfer and the like. And these payments were made so that Nike could direct particular players to particular universities that they had these contracts with in order to fulfill Nike's goal of building up the program, because, of course, if the program is successful on the national level, then more Nike merchandise is sold and Nike makes more billions of profits. So this is not some charitable exercise by Nike. Nike isn't dipping into the charitable fund to assist these players out of the goodness of their heart. This is all about one thing and one thing only, and that is making billions of dollars of profits for Nike.
And this is intriguing. Now, we just had Zion probably going to head to the New Orleans Pelicans, but he's involved in this story in a fascinating way, and it makes sense. This is not Robin Hood, right? This is not a company just deciding to give poor kids money for charitable reasons. They're doing it because they want a relationship with players that they think can later make them tens or hundreds of millions of dollars based on being at the center of the basketball universe, and they start these relationships at a young age. What happened with Zion Williamson that you were able to uncover, and payments to his family, his mom in particular?
Well, I've got to be a little careful on what I say, but here's what I'll say. Zion was looking at going to the University of Kansas, and there's already been considerable evidence out there relating to wiretap communications and the like that came out during the Adidas case relating to what it was going to take, quote, unquote, for Zion to go to Kansas versus another school, almost like a bidding process, and that Zion was not going to just go to some college for free, quote, unquote. I mean, that's already out there.
Yes.
And so ultimately, of course, he goes to Duke. Now, some want everyone to believe that Zion just decided to forgo well over $100,000 in compensation for him and his family, which he would have obtained from Kansas and other schools. He just decided that he was so intrigued by the Blue Devil program that he decided to skip all that and instead went to Duke for nothing. And I'm telling you right now, that's just not what happened. There's considerable issues relating to a home in the North Carolina area that Zion's family ended up living in during his tenure at Duke. And I've made some allegations relating to the fact that Zion received compensation, him and his family, from Nike in connection with that choice. Those have not been refuted by anybody. And interestingly enough, I have yet to hear from Duke or the NC2A, and Nike hasn't denied funneling money to Zion and his family.
And so the way to think about this in general is, let's say that Zion at 15, 16 years old, Nike and Adidas become aware of this phenom on the basketball circuit. And they're thinking to themselves, my God, this is the vessel by which we are going to sell a ton of shoes in the future if we can get our shoes on this guy's feet. And so they reach out, they make contact with him, and both of them are kind of dueling in some sense to provide him benefits to try to get him to go to either an Adidas or a Nike school, because the idea is if he goes to Kansas, which is an Adidas school, we'll have the upper hand in being able to sign him when he leaves and goes to the NBA. And if he goes to Duke, for instance, which is a Nike school, then Nike will. And so this is an early battle to try to get Zion's, signing, basically, for the shoe company. That's in essence why this would occur, correct?
No, absolutely. You nailed it. I mean, this is a foundational effort looking at the long-term play, which is the long-term play is not only to send them to a Nike college and have the college succeed so more Nike gear can be sold, but ultimately for when he comes out, for him to sign a shoe deal with Nike, because while that shoe deal may pay him $150 million, which is what they're talking about right now, it's going to pay Nike multiples of that. I mean, it's going to ultimately, Nike can make $1 billion to $3 billion on these shoe deals. And if Nike is able to bribe these players with these illegal payments along the way, then all of a sudden they've got the player under their thumb and their families under their thumb, right? Because in the specter hangs this threat, this untold threat, that if perhaps the player doesn't sign with Nike or Adidas, whoever made the payment, well, what happens if that comes to light? Now all of a sudden you have the player and their family at criminal risk. So, I mean, this is a very ugly process. And the people out there on Twitter and otherwise that want to blast me for criticizing these players for taking money and their families for taking money, they don't get it. They don't understand. This isn't about that. It's not about the players getting paid. It's about Nike controlling the process and engaging in rampant illegal conduct.
And you and I would both agree here that we don't have a problem with the players being paid at all. In fact, we think they deserve it. It's just that this is illegal, fraudulent activity, and if you're going to go after Adidas, why is Nike getting a pass? The NCAA, you mentioned them. Have they reached out to you at all seeking any of these documents or seeking your cooperation on any kind of investigation?
Crickets. I have not heard anything whatsoever, and I've been very clear. I'm willing to sit down and cooperate with any college as well as the NC2A and disclose what I have, discuss the documents, and provide whatever cooperation that I possibly can. And again, going back to what you said, Clay, we do agree that these players should be paid, but we can't turn over the process to Nike. I mean, if we're going to do that, let's have a Nike draft where Nike gets to decide, Nike announces basically where every star player in America is going to go play college basketball. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, and I think this is where the fairness factors in, because many people out there are fans of different programs, and they find it very unfair. I mean, Rick Pitino lost his job over this, but that Adidas schools would suddenly be under siege, and Nike, which is doing more and worse behavior, gets a pass. But you also feel like, hey, I want somebody to go to my school because the coach is able to recruit them on a fair playing field. And if the sneakers are, the shoe companies are basically buying and selling top prospects and directing them to go to certain schools, that definitely upsets the fairness standard in my mind. Now, last question for you. A lot of people listening to this interview right now, and I'll give you a shot, are saying, hey, this sounds very credible. I looked at the documents. I'm telling you, I've looked at the documents. I believe it. But I kind of hinted at this earlier. I don't believe it because Michael Avenatti is involved. What would you say to those people who might have political differences for you, who might have decided they don't like the Trump situation, they don't like what happened with Stormy Daniels, everything else? My position is this is totally different. What would you say to them about that?
Well, I'd say that, across 20 years, I've got $1 billion in verdicts and settlements. I've got a long track record of delivering on what I've said. And you know what? Ignore what I say. Look at the documents. The documents are clear as day, period.
Outstanding stuff, as always. We want to get you on again down the line, but appreciate you giving us time this morning. That Michael Avenatti interview, I am blown away by the degree to which the media and the government has protected Nike in this story. And I understand a lot of you out there, you're saying, oh, I don't like Michael Avenatti because of his political-related issues. But long before he got involved in representing Stormy Daniels and got involved in the Trump administration conflicts and controversies and everything else, he's a lawyer. And he's a lawyer who's involved in the plaintiff's side of the bar trying to make money by exposing wrongdoing. And Nike is dead to rights here. I don't know what the NCAA is doing. I don't know what the schools are doing. I don't know what most people in the media are doing. I think they're afraid of pointing out that Nike has been buying and selling high school players and directing them to schools for years now. They've spent tens of millions of dollars paying the top players in the country and encouraging them to go to Nike schools. And it starts on the AAU circuit when Adidas or Nike primarily are one of the sponsors of these AAU teams. And it's not a coincidence, it really shouldn't be if you pay attention, that a kid who is on a Nike or Adidas AAU team, that is when he's in high school, ends up going to a Nike or Adidas college. That's because those companies have been spending lots of money on them. And the wild thing about this criminal investigation is Adidas, which spends a pinprick of the dollars that Nike does, somehow ended up the focus of the criminal investigation, and everybody in the government and everybody in the media and all of the NCAA just overlooks all of these receipts that Michael Avenatti has got that prove literally, here's where the money came from, here's how Nike paid all these players. Whether it's Zion or whether it's the year before that or 10 years ago, the top college basketball players in the country, they're getting funneled to the top Nike schools because Nike wants its schools to dominate because it helps their brand. Duke wearing Nikes and having Zion was incredibly beneficial to the overall brand value of Nike, notwithstanding the blowout of the shoe that Zion had. It's just crazy to me the amount of cover-up that's going on here when Nike is guilty as guilty can be. Why is everybody carrying Nike's water? Why everybody in the media? Why the government? Why the NCAA? It's wild. Absolutely insane story. This is OUTKICK on Fox Sports Radio.